Karen parked in my barn again, so I locked it and let her call for help. I've lived on my small farm for nearly 15 years now. It's nothing fancy, just 5 acres with a farmhouse, a decent-sized barn, and enough land to grow some veggies and keep a few chickens. It's my sanctuary away from the hustle and bustle of city life, located about 20 minutes outside of town. I love the peace and quiet, the wide open space, and the freedom to do whatever I want on my own property. When I first moved here, most of my neighbors were farmers or people like me who just wanted some space to breathe. But over the last few years, a lot of the nearby farmland has been sold off to developers who've built these massive countryside estates, basically McMansions on tiny plots of land where city folks can pretend they're living the rural lifestyle. That's how I ended up with Karen as my neighbor about 2 years ago. Karen moved into one of those new developments about a half-mile down the road from my place. From day one, she made it clear she wasn't your typical country neighbor. Most people around here wave when they pass each other on the road, help each other out when needed, and generally mind their own business. Not Karen. She immediately appointed herself as the unofficial community organizer for our stretch of rural road. Within the first month, she dropped by my house 3 times, once to complain about my rooster crowing in the morning, on a farm. Imagine that, once to ask if I could relocate my compost pile because she could sometimes smell it when the wind blew in her direction, from half a mile away, and once to invite me to join her newly formed Countryside Community Association, which sounded suspiciously like an HOA. I politely declined all her requests and suggestions, which clearly rubbed her the wrong way. But things remained civil, if a bit tense, until about 6 months ago when the trouble with my barn began. I've got this big red barn that sits about 50 yards from the main road. It's nothing special, just your typical old barn with sliding doors on the front. I use it to store my tractor, some tools, feed for the chickens, and other farm supplies. I've also got a small workshop set up in there where I like to work on various projects during my free time. One evening in early spring, I came home from work and noticed an unfamiliar SUV parked inside my barn. At first, I was confused. Maybe a friend had stopped by and parked there for some reason. But I couldn't imagine who would just help themselves to my barn without asking. I walked over and found a note stuck to the driver's side window. Had to run into town for a meeting. This was the only covered parking nearby. Back soon, Karen. I was stunned. The audacity of this woman to just drive onto my property and park in my barn without asking. I waited around for about an hour, and sure enough, Karen came strolling up my driveway like she owned the place. "Oh, hi there," she called out cheerfully. "Thanks so much for letting me use your barn. It started to look like rain, and I just had my car detailed yesterday." "I didn't let you use my barn," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "You can't just park on my property without permission." Karen's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, don't be silly. It's just a barn, and it was just for a couple of hours. No harm done, right?" "Actually, there is harm done," I explained. "You entered my property without permission. That's trespassing." "Trespassing?" she scoffed. "We're neighbors. Neighbors help each other out." "Yes, when they ask permission first," I emphasized. "Please don't park in my barn again without asking." Karen rolled her eyes as if I was being completely unreasonable. "Fine, whatever," she said dismissively as she got into her SUV. Some people are so uptight about their property. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. About a week later, I came home to find Karen's SUV in my barn again. This time, there was no note. I immediately called her number. I had it from when she tried to get me to join her association. "Karen, your car is in my barn again," I said when she answered. "I thought I was clear last time that you need to ask permission before parking on my property." "Oh, I tried calling you, but you didn't answer," she lied. There had been no missed calls on my phone. "It's pouring rain, and I had an emergency meeting in town. I knew you wouldn't mind." "I do mind," I said firmly. "This is the last time, Karen. If I find your car in my barn again without permission, there will be consequences." "You don't have to be so dramatic," she huffed. "I'll be there in an hour to get it." 3 hours later, she finally showed up. No apology, just a casual wave as she drove off. At this point, I was getting frustrated, so I decided to take some precautions. I installed a simple lock on the outside of the barn doors. Nothing fancy. Just a hasp with a padlock that would prevent the doors from sliding open. I figured that would solve the problem. For a few weeks, everything was quiet. Then, one afternoon, I got home from work to find the padlock cut and on the ground, and Karen's SUV sitting in my barn. This time, I was livid. I marched down to her house and knocked on the door. When she answered, I held up the cut padlock. "What the hell, Karen? You cut my lock to park in my barn?" "Well, I wouldn't have had to if you hadn't locked it in the first place," she said indignantly. "It's really inconvenient for me when it rains and I can't use your barn." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's my barn on my property. You can't just use it whenever you want." "Why not? It's not like you're using all of it," she argued. There's plenty of space for my car and your stuff. You're just being selfish. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Karen, listen carefully. You are never to park in my barn again. This is trespassing and destruction of property. Next time, I'm calling the police. Go ahead, she challenged. You think the police are going to care about a neighborly dispute over a barn? They'll think you're being petty. I didn't bother arguing further. I just turned and walked away, fuming. When I got home, I checked my security cameras, which I had installed after the second incident, and saw clear footage of Karen using bolt cutters on my lock. At least I had evidence if I needed it. I replaced the lock with a much sturdier one, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't stop her if she was determined enough. I was right. Just 2 days later, I came home to find she had somehow jimmied the sliding door off its track enough to create a gap she could squeeze her SUV through. There it was, parked in my barn again, with another note. Had to get creative since you're being so difficult about sharing. Be back at 7:00. That was it. I'd had enough of this woman's entitlement and disrespect for my property. It was time for a lesson she wouldn't forget. I checked my watch. It was just past 4 p.m. I had about 3 hours before she planned to return. I got to work immediately. First, I carefully slid the barn door back on its track. Then, I used my tractor to move several heavy crates and pieces of equipment around her SUV, essentially boxing it in. Nothing was touching her precious car, but there was no way she could maneuver it out without moving everything first. And those crates were far too heavy for one person to move by hand. Next, I fixed the door so it couldn't be jimmied open again and secured it with my new heavy-duty lock. For good measure, I added a second lock on the other side. Finally, I went inside, packed a small overnight bag, and called my buddy who lives about 2 hours away. I had been planning to visit him that weekend anyway. I was just moving the trip up by one night. At 6:55 p.m., right before I was about to leave, my phone rang. It was Karen. I'm running a little late, she said casually. I'll probably be there around 8 to get my car. Actually, Karen, I won't be home, I replied calmly. I'm going away for the weekend. There was a pause. Well, how am I supposed to get my car? That's a good question, I said. Maybe you should have thought about that before you parked on my property without permission. Again, after I repeatedly asked you not to. What? You can't just lock up my car, she exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. I didn't lock up your car, I corrected her. I locked up my barn. You know, the barn on my property that you keep trespassing in? This isn't funny, she shouted. I need my car tonight, and I needed you to respect my property. Looks like we're both disappointed. I'm calling the police, she threatened. Go ahead, I replied, echoing her words from before. You think the police are going to care about a neighborly dispute over a barn? Especially when I have security footage of you cutting my lock and breaking into my property multiple times? I could hear her fuming on the other end of the line. When will you be back? She finally asked through gritted teeth. Sunday evening. Maybe Monday. I haven't decided yet. I can't wait until Monday to get my car. She shrieked. Then I suggest you call a locksmith and a tow truck, I said. Though they might have some questions about why your car is locked in someone else's barn. You're going to regret this, she hissed before hanging up. I smiled to myself, got in my pickup, and drove away for a relaxing weekend with my buddy. Throughout the weekend, Karen blew up my phone with calls and texts, alternating between threats and pleas. I responded to none of them. On Saturday, I got a call from the local sheriff's department. I answered that one. Hello. This is Deputy Wilson. We received a complaint from a woman named Karen about her vehicle being locked in your barn? Yes, officer, I replied politely. Karen has been repeatedly trespassing on my property and parking in my barn without permission, despite multiple warnings from me. The last time, she actually cut my lock with bolt cutters to get in. I have security camera footage of all of this if you need to see it. I see, said the deputy, his tone shifting. And you locked the barn with her car inside? I locked my barn before leaving for the weekend. Yes. She parked her car in there without my permission. I told her she'd need to call a locksmith and a tow truck if she wanted to get it before I returned. There was a pause, and I could hear the deputy suppressing a chuckle. Well, technically, you're within your rights to secure your own property. Did you damage her vehicle in any way? Not at all, I assured him. It's perfectly safe. Just inaccessible at the moment. I'll let Miss Karen know that this appears to be a civil matter, he said. Though I might suggest that when you return, you work out a more neighborly solution. I've tried being neighborly, officer. That's what got me here. After I hung up, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Mike from Mike's Towing. A lady gave me your number. Says she needs her SUV towed from your barn but can't get access. Is this something you can authorize? I replied. Mike, the lady in question parked in my barn without permission. She's been doing this repeatedly despite my asking her to stop. I'm out of town until Monday. If she can get a locksmith to open my barn without damaging my property, you're welcome to tow her car out. Otherwise, she'll need to wait until I return. Mike's response was brief but said it all. Gotcha. Not touching this situation with a 10-foot pole. We'll tell her she needs to wait. I enjoyed the rest of my weekend in peace, ignoring the increasingly desperate messages from Karen. I even extended my stay by an extra day, returning Monday afternoon instead of Sunday evening. When I pulled into my driveway, I found Karen sitting on my porch steps, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was a mess, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. Finally, she exclaimed, jumping to her feet. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I had to cancel all my plans, I missed an important dinner party, and I had to call an Uber every time I needed to go somewhere. Sounds inconvenient, I remarked as I unlocked my front door. Kind of like having someone repeatedly trespass on your property and ignore your request to stop. This isn't a joke, she snapped. I want my car right now. Sure thing, I said calmly, dropping my bag inside. Let me just move a few things first. I took my time walking to the barn, Karen fuming behind me the whole way. When I unlocked the barn and slid open the door, her jaw dropped at the sight of her SUV completely boxed in by heavy equipment and crates. What did you do? She gasped. Just reorganized a bit, I said with a shrug. Give me about an hour to move everything with my tractor, and you can be on your way. An hour? She repeated incredulously. Unless you'd prefer to wait until tomorrow? I am pretty tired from my drive. No. Do it now, she demanded. I took my sweet time moving everything, while Karen paced and checked her watch every 2 minutes. Finally, after about 90 minutes, yes, I deliberately dragged it out. Her SUV was free. I hope we've reached an understanding, I said as she yanked open her car door. My property is not your parking spot. Not ever. She glared at me with pure hatred but didn't say a word as she got in her car and started the engine. Oh, and Karen? I called out as she began to back out. I've upgraded my security system. Any future attempts to enter my property without permission will be recorded and immediately reported to the police as criminal trespassing. Have a nice day. The look on her face was priceless as she sped away, gravel flying from under her tires. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen had one last card to play. The next day, I received a certified letter from a lawyer claiming I had illegally detained Karen's property and caused her emotional distress and financial hardship. They were demanding $5,000 in damages. I sent the letter, along with all my security footage and a detailed timeline of Karen's repeated trespassing and property damage, to my own lawyer. He wrote back to her attorney with what I imagine was a professionally worded version of "Are you kidding me with this nonsense?" Because I never heard another word about it. Karen still lives down the road, but she gives my property a wide berth now. Sometimes I see her glaring at me when we pass each other in town, but she doesn't dare say a word. As for my barn, it remains securely locked at all times, though these days, no one tries to break in. The funny thing is, all of this could have been avoided if she'd just asked permission like a normal, respectful person. I probably would have said yes if she had a good reason to park there occasionally. But entitlement and disrespect? That gets you locked in a barn with no way out except an expensive tow bill and a whole lot of humiliation. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones that hit you right in the wallet and the ego. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the supportive comments. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I still have all the security footage saved in multiple places, just in case. 2. No, she hasn't tried to park on my property again, though she did leave a nasty anonymous review for my small woodworking business that I'm 99% sure was her. 3. The total cost to her ended up being around $450 for the emergency locksmith plus tow truck service, according to Mike, who became a customer of my woodworking business after this incident and told me all about it. Edit 2. For those asking about legal consequences, my lawyer advised me that while I was technically within my rights as she was trespassing, it could potentially have escalated into a legal headache if she'd pushed it. He recommended installing better signage and security in case of future incidents with her or anyone else. I now have no trespassing and private property signs posted prominently, plus cameras covering all approaches to my property. Update. 6 months later, the neighborhood showdown and sweet victory. It's been 6 months since the barn incident with Karen, and I figured you all deserved an update on how things have played out. Grab a drink and settle in, because this story took some wild turns. After the barn lockout, Karen spent about a month giving me the silent treatment. No complaints, no attempts to trespass, nothing. Just death glares whenever we crossed paths in town. I was perfectly fine with this arrangement. My property remained Karen-free, and I could focus on my woodworking business and farm. But as the saying goes, entitled people don't change their spots. They just find new ways to be entitled. About 2 months after the barn incident, I started noticing strange things happening around my property. My mailbox was knocked over twice in 1 week. Someone had thrown trash on my driveway several times. The no trespassing signs I'd installed kept mysteriously disappearing. I couldn't prove it was Karen, but the timing was suspicious. Still, I took the high road and simply fixed the damage, replaced the signs, and installed a sturdier mailbox post set in concrete. My security cameras didn't catch the culprit. Whoever it was knew where the cameras were positioned. Then came the letter. Not from Karen directly, but from her new pet project, the Countryside Community Improvement Committee, CCIC, which was basically the rural version of an HOA that she'd been trying to start for years. The letter was sent to everyone on our road, including me. It read, "Dear neighbor, the CCIC is pleased to announce our first community beautification initiative. We have noted several properties in our area that do not meet the standards of our developing community. As responsible neighbors, we are asking all residents to address the following issues. Remove any unsightly farm equipment visible from the road, repaint all structures to approved colors, see attached chart, remove livestock that creates excessive noise or odors, replace non-standard fencing with approved designs. Failure to comply may result in community action. We will be conducting our first assessment on June 15th. Sincerely, the CCIC Board." At the bottom was a list of the board members. Guess who was president? Yep, Karen. I laughed and tossed the letter in my recycling bin. This fake HOA had absolutely no legal authority whatsoever. Our properties were all unincorporated county land with no deed restrictions. She couldn't enforce a single thing on that list. But then I started hearing from other neighbors. Tom, the elderly widower who's lived here for 40 years, called me sounding worried. "Did you get that letter?" he asked. "They're saying I need to get rid of my chickens and repaint my house. I can't afford all that on my fixed income." Similar calls came from other neighbors, especially the older folks and those who'd lived here long before the fancy developments started popping up. They were genuinely concerned about these requirements. That's when I got mad. It's one thing for Karen to mess with me, but targeting elderly neighbors with fake rules and intimidation tactics? That crossed a line. I decided to take action. First, I called my lawyer, the same one who handled the barn incident, and asked him to draft a simple one-page letter explaining that. 1. The CCIC had no legal authority whatsoever. 2. Their requirements were unenforceable. 3. Any attempts to penalize residents could constitute harassment. Next, I called a community meeting at my place. Almost everyone from the original farms and homesteads showed up, about 15 families in total. I distributed copies of my lawyer's letter and explained the situation. Karen and her committee have no power here, I assured them. They can't fine you, they can't force you to change your property, and they certainly can't conduct assessments without permission to enter your land. The relief in the room was palpable. But then one of my neighbors, Janice, raised her hand. "That's good to know, but how do we stop them from harassing us? Karen and her friends have been driving by my place taking pictures and leaving notes about my garden being disorderly." Others chimed in with similar stories. Karen's group had been systematically intimidating people, and it needed to stop. We formed a plan that night, Operation Rural Freedom as Tom jokingly called it. Here's what we did. First, everyone installed no trespassing signs on their properties. My lawyer provided proper wording to make them legally enforceable. Second, we created a phone tree. If anyone spotted Karen or her committee members taking pictures or leaving notes, they'd alert everyone else who would come out to witness and document the harassment. Third, I helped set up simple security cameras for those who wanted them, especially the elderly neighbors who felt vulnerable. And finally, the masterstroke, we scheduled our own community event for June 14th, the day before the CCIC's planned assessment. We called it the Countryside Heritage Celebration. Karen and her committee members weren't invited, of course, but we made sure they knew about it through the grapevine. The day of our celebration arrived, and it was perfect. We held it at my place since I had the most open land. Everyone brought food, drinks, and stories about our little rural community. Tom brought old photographs showing how the area had looked decades ago. Janice organized games for the kids. I fired up my smoker and made enough pulled pork to feed a small army. As the afternoon progressed, we all signed a document that my lawyer had prepared, a formal neighborhood agreement stating that we rejected any attempt to impose HOA-like restrictions on our properties. It wasn't legally necessary, but it was symbolic and showed our unity. Right around 5 p.m., as predicted, Karen and 2 other CCIC members drove slowly past my place, clearly trying to see what was going on. Seeing 30-plus people having a great time must have bothered her, because she actually had the nerve to stop and get out of her car. She marched up to my property line with her clipboard in hand. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I walked over to greet her, making sure to stay on my side of the property line. "Hey Karen, we're having a neighborhood celebration. Private event, I'm afraid." She glanced at her clipboard. "Well, I just wanted to remind you that tomorrow is our community assessment. We'll be evaluating all properties for compliance with our standards." This was my moment. I smiled and handed her an envelope. "Actually, Karen, this is for you and your committee." She opened it and her face went pale as she read the letter from my lawyer. which explained in no uncertain terms that 1. Any entry onto private property without explicit permission would constitute criminal trespass. 2. Any attempts to create or enforce unauthorized restrictions could result in legal action. 3. The documented pattern of harassment against multiple residents had been reported to the county sheriff. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "The community needs standards." "The community disagrees," I replied calmly, gesturing to all my neighbors enjoying themselves behind me. "We like our farms and homes just as they are. Now, unless you'd like to join our celebration, provided you can follow our one rule of respecting everyone here, I think we're done." Karen looked around, seeing all my neighbors watching her. Many were filming with their phones. She knew she was beaten. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She turned and stormed back to her car. The next day, the day of the scheduled assessment, not a single CCIC member was seen anywhere near our properties. We'd won. In the months since then, Karen has quieted down considerably. The CCIC seems to have disbanded, or at least stopped bothering us. My security cameras haven't caught any suspicious activity, and my mailbox has remained standing. The best part? Our little community is stronger than ever. What started as a one-time event has turned into a monthly potluck that rotates between our homes. Tom is teaching some of the younger kids about raising chickens. Janice started a community garden on part of her land. I've been giving free woodworking lessons to anyone interested. Last week, I heard through the grapevine that Karen's house is up for sale. Apparently, she's moving to a proper planned community with appropriate standards. I can't say any of us will miss her. As for my barn, it remains securely locked when not in use. Though these days, I sometimes open it up for our community gatherings when rain threatens our outdoor plans. Turns out it's a pretty great space for bringing people together, when they ask permission, of course. I guess the moral of this story is that standing your ground doesn't just protect your own property. Sometimes it protects an entire community, and that's worth all the hassle of dealing with a Karen or two along the way. Edit 3. Thanks for all the support. To those asking if we threw a goodbye party when Karen moved, we didn't, but we did have our regularly scheduled potluck the weekend after her moving truck left. The turnout was amazing, and the mood was, shall we say, particularly festive. Also, for those wondering about legal repercussions, there weren't any. My lawyer told me that Karen's attorney likely explained to her how precarious her position was legally. Between the documented trespassing, property damage, harassment, and impersonating an official entity, by implying the CCIC had authority it didn't have, she was potentially facing both civil and criminal charges if she pushed things further. Sometimes the best legal outcome is when legal action isn't needed at all. The next one is entitled People Story. My son just graduated high school and we were paying so he could go on a road trip with his friends. He was supposed to go Wednesday. My wife's mother and father got in a car accident. They live in another state, so we had to drive about 4 hours. My wife was a wreck and wasn't in the position to drive since her dad was critical. He pulled through luckily. We have 2 other kids, 11 and 7. We can't leave them at home alone and we couldn't find a sitter to watch them on such short notice. We even tried our neighbors but he couldn't do it. So that left our 18-year-old. He was pissed to put it mildly but did it. I told him we would make it up to him, and if he could ask if his friend could move it back a week. They couldn't, sadly. We were gone for 2 days. He pulled though. My wife stayed and I headed back. I paid him for watching the kids and went to talk to him about getting him on the trip. It was supposed to be 2 weeks and they should just be a state over. He blows up about ruining his trip and there is no point going even though it should still 12 days of the trip. He called up a jerk and locked himself in his room. I need another opinion since this was emergency and he doesn't seem to care. His grandparents almost passed. Edit. Well, he called his mom. Let's say it didn't end well. He did say basically said the same thing he said to me. Wife had a breakdown on the phone with him. She sent him the injuries and pictures of grandpa/grandma. He finally came out of his room and told me he isn't going to go on the trip and the plane tickets aren't needed. Talked to my wife. Never heard her that mad. Son confirmed what happened. He started yelling at her the moment the call started and she lost her shit when he called her selfish. On good news, Grandpa has some feeling back in his legs, which was a huge concern. For people saying we didn't have emergency plan, we do. First, my closest friend vacation, main babysitter not available, backup babysitter not available, last resort grandparents hospital. We tried to find someone that why we even asked our neighbor, which I have a good relationship with. This will be my last update. Had a conversation with my son about everything. Mom and him will have a conversation when she calms down. His friends are not a state over. They are about 2 down at this point and going to Mexico. They are probably will get to the border tonight. They were supposed to be going to California. He had his passport and everything ready. This is a fucking mess. I haven't informed my wife yet and will wait until she is calmer. I'll leave off with I hope none of you ever have to deal with a situation like this and please remember your parents are human. Update. Thank you to the people who reached out and asked how we were doing. I informed my wife about him going to Mexico and not California last night. It was over FaceTime, and after a long conversation we agreed she was too emotional to deal with the situation and that I will handle it while she focuses on her parents. I got the full story for my son first. The original plan was to go to California, but it changed to Mexico. He knew we wouldn't pay for a trip out of the country, so he lied. When the emergency happened, he realized that if he missed the leave date he wouldn't be able to join without us knowing he lied. I am furious he was using our money for a trip and lying to our faces. So he is paying back every dime that we gave him for the trip. He already gave us $2,000, but the rest will have to come from his paycheck since he already spent it. Next was a log conversation about if he wants to be in this family. He is 18, he can leave. But if he wants to be in the family he has to give, not just take form everyone else. We aren't required to do shit at this point, but we love him so we do. He can't be lying to our faces and screaming at people when their parents are in bad shape. He admits he was upset and went too far, especially with his mom, and when she sent those pictures in sunk in how bad the situation was. Not thrilled she did that. It was then it sunk in his grandparents could have passed. He apologized to his mom and me, and she apologized for her breakdown on the phone. We're going to book family therapy since our trust that our son has been destroyed, and it will help with the whole event. I don't regret not taking the younger kids to the ICU. It's an awful place and would be awful for them, and seeing my wife having her breakdowns. On good news, Grandpa was moved to a normal room. Unsure when he will be released, but it's a long recovery for him. Also, no, he didn't cause the accident. It was on her highway and weaving car hit them. We think we will move down to the grandparents' home to help them, but it is uncertain at the moment. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.